the Antelope Valley Eastern Water Agency. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Here.
Division 6, Audrey Miller.
Here.
Division 5, Robert Paris.
Here.
Division 4, George Lane.
Here.
Division 1, Shelley Sourceable.
Here.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Here.
Division 1, Keith Dias.
Here.
Dwayne Chisholm.
Here.
Attorney Markman.
Here.
And Holly Hughes present.
Thank you. Item 3, voluntary public roll call. If any member of the public wishes to introduce themselves, please feel free to do so now.
John Ukestead.
Thank you, John.
John Joyce reporting for the Acton Agua-Dulce News.
Item 4, public comments and period open to the public. If anyone wishes to address the board on any item not on the agenda, please feel free to do so now. Item 5, adoption of agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
This is Director Miller, also move.
Thank you.
This is Director Sourceable, I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes.
Shelley Sourceable.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes. Measure passes. Item 6, presentation and workshop on fiscal year 2022 and 2023 operations budget. Dwayne?
Yes, thank you, Board President Dias, members of the board. I have a presentation for you tonight. This is in workshop format, so feel free to stop me at any time to discuss any particular item as we go through the presentation tonight. I want to start off with a little bit of background. I know the board knows what the mission statement of Avek is, but I thought I'd go over it. The mission of Avek is deliver reliable, sustainable, high-quality supplemental water to the region in a cost-effective and efficient manner. One other item is Avek is a pass-through agency, and we are an agency that recovers our costs and expenditures, and the operation budget that is funded through water rates needs to be a balanced budget at the end of the day. So any revenues that are collected in excess of expenditures are used to offset future costs, while any expenditures in excess of revenues will be collected in a subsequent year. So it works both ways. If you're short 1 year, then you need to collect those additional funds in the next year. So that's just a little bit of background information on a pass-through agency. Moving on to the next slide here, we've tackled this budget presentation and this budget process a little different than we have in the past. We've had essentially, this will be our second workshop that we had. The first one, we worked on the fixed costs, which are funded by the voter-approved taxes that are associated with assessed value, and that particular funding mechanisms and revenues and expenses were explained at the last meeting. We also went over some assumptions in preparation for this workshop, and also we discussed the reserves for the State Water Project portion of the budget. We're going to go over today. We're going to go over our operating budget, which is the actual operation, the treatment of water, distribution of water. Also, we'll talk about our asset management program and capital program, which are funded by the operating budget. And then next Tuesday at a regular board meeting, we'll put together all this information and present a final presentation of the budget for the board to consider adoption at that time. So a little bit of review on the what we had from workshop 1. You can see here, this is the graph. I think it shows precisely what's happening with regards to our voter tax revenue. You can see that our assessed value since 2014-15 has steadily increased, which has allowed us to keep pace with our state water project costs, fixed costs. If you look at and you can see here's our fixed costs, a graph from the same period. One thing you can see is back in 2016, there was a spike, unexpected spike in the DWR fixed costs, and subsequently in the next 2 years, there was a bit of a reduction by DWR in those costs, or where they kind of held firm. And then there's been a steady increase the last 4 years, as you can see, and we anticipate that type of increase will continue on, given the fact that we have some real energy shortages that need to be dealt with, in addition to our inflation factors that will also place stresses on the DWR fixed costs.
I have a question, Dwayne. Okay, so are you saying that the cost has to do strictly with DWR?
Yes, this is a recap of the first item. This is just the DWR cost.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah. We also provided you this this graph that shows that the tax rate from its beginning back in 60-61, you can see that it went up in the late 70s to almost 35 cents per $100 of asset value, and then in 1986-87 began a decline to where it's been at 7 cents per $100 of assessed value for the last, I would say, 20 years or so, and that's why the assessed value of land and improvements has been what's allowed the fixed costs to cover the state water project, and that's why it's very important. The development of the Antelope Valley, the various land that's available for development within the valley, as that assessed value goes up, the agency's revenue increases. And to this point, we've been very fortunate that it has matched up pretty closely with the increases that DWR has charged us. The final slide I wanted to provide you here was the results of that first workshop. You can see there that for the 2023 budget, we have a little over $30 million in revenues. We have a total expenditures from the state water fixed costs of $29,284,000. And so there was a surplus of $1,516,000, which is going to be added to the state water project reserve fund, so that it's not commingled with the reserves that are associated with our operating budget. And so that reserve balance as of 6/30/22 was $26 million, which was within the reserve targets that have been established by the board for this particular reserve. So that's what we discussed last time. We also discussed these assumptions for preparation of this of the operating budget workshop this particular evening. we had the property tax revenues, we're going to be based on 21, 22 HDL Cohen estimates. We're expecting to sell 35,000 acre feet, which is less than what the demand would be, but that's because of our state water allocation for budget purposes, and about 2,000 or 3,000 acre feet potentially from either pump-in water or other dry year water programs. We do have seen a spike in the variable rate that DWR charges for pumping water over the Tehachapies and getting that to us. We have a graph later on that'll help explain that. We're not anticipating any revenues from outside sales or transfers other than what we have on the books today. And you can see the various health insurance cost increases that have been highlighted and a COLA of 8.1%. And this is the information that was used in developing the operating budget that I'm going to show you right now. So similarly, let's look at water sales. And this graph here is very telling. You can see that our water sale revenues have increased over the last 4 or 5 years at a fairly consistent rate. And then in 2022 is when we had the shortage of not being able to deliver the same volume of water that we have in the past. And so you see a shortfall in water sales. And that'll become, just remember that as we go through the balance of the presentation. And that's a very compelling component.
I've got another question. This is Director Donato. So you're saying that 2022 income to the agency is going to decrease
Yes.
basically under 2019. So we're talking with inflation well over 10%. It looks like we're down income quite a bit. So I just want to make sure that what I see here is correct.
Yes, your income in 2022. This is at the end of this fiscal year. You can see the income's coming down as we project in through the next fiscal year. We're expecting similar type of revenue reductions simply because we don't have the ability to deliver more water than 35,000 acre feet that we've identified for the board. It's part of the assumption.
Thank you.
So let's historically, we kind of look at our operating costs here, and you can see that our operating costs have over the last 4 years have increased at a fairly consistent rate as they've gone through, and it's a little flatter than our revenues side. And but you can see that those costs come in through 22, 23, and we anticipate that 23's costs are going to be higher than 2022's, and we'll show you the reasons why. I missed the wrong button. Here's, I have one final graph here, and then we'll get into the operating budget here. So you can see in prior years, what this graph shows is our water sales in blue, our operating expenses are in green, and then you see transfers and exchanges. And we've used transfers and exchanges over the last several years to offset some of the revenue shortfalls that we've seen in our operating budget in order to balance those budgets. Obviously, because of the very short amount of drought year water that's available in 2022, and we can anticipate that in 2023, we have a shortfall here in our revenues versus expenses.
Could you go back to that, Bruce? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the next slide here, as you know, we have a.
Can you go back one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure. That's
I
okay.
myself muted. So I have a better understanding. The shortfall, I'm looking at this blue line.
Right.
If you go cross to some equal, it's basically somewhere between, I can't see the bottom, but it's between, see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's below the income of these two down here. Again, with over 10% inflation, really that shortfall is actually astronomical when it comes to revenues.
Correct. So, what this highlights is that what effect a shortfall in revenues has versus your operating costs, as when you have a decline like this, without the outside water sales that we've enjoyed the last several years.
I see. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. So we're basically between 2018 and 2019 in revenues. And if you take the progressive inflation rate of the years going forward, we're somewhere between 18 and 20%. It's going to be upside down this year in revenues coming in with the cost of inflation. So okay, interesting.
So, as you know, we have a very extensive line item budget that we have and we go through, and I've asked the staff to develop a zero-based budget for each one of those line items and have them address the impacts of inflation on each one of those line items, along with our water delivery schedule and other supply chain issues and other things that might affect the budget. So we did that, and what we come up with was four areas we would like to highlight, even a flavor of how things have changed in the upcoming year versus the last year. You can see here that we're talking about pumping. This is electrical costs associated with pumping. And as we indicated, the electrical costs for that DWR charges is going up significantly. Also, our local pumping costs are going up, and you can see that difference between 1.9 million to 2.2 million. About an 18% change in that particular line item.
Do you think, Dwayne, can I get a question on that? Do you think
Sure.
it's because Governor Newsom encouraged so many people to get electric cars and they're taking the power away from the State Water Project?
It's a combination of things, but I will say this, that
That's incredible.
The trend to go green on 100% everything as soon as possible has lent itself, and the removal of the nuclear power facility, which was a baseline electrical power generator, along with some of the coastal gas-fired plants that have been scheduled for decommissioning. We have a energy shortfall that has to be made up by outside the state of California sources of electrical supply over the next couple of years. And, simple supply and demand has increased the cost of that power to California, because we don't have those other baseload amounts that we've had in the past. So it's a little, from a budgeting point of view, we can anticipate that until this the amount of battery storage and other storage facilities come online, until those can come online and make up the difference, to have that stored power to curtail the amount of spot market or next day market electrical purchases it's the only way to tend to want to reduce our energy costs moving forward.
Just a week and a half ago, the governor got on public media and asked all the people that have electric cars to cut back 50% of their charging during the next couple of months because of the heat. And I was just thinking, if he went ahead and just electric charged the Delta Smelt, we wouldn't have a problem. I'm sorry to make you laugh, but this is absolutely ludicrous, and you're doing a good job. Keep it going. But, I mean, this is absolutely incredible what we're hearing today.
Yes.
He took away our frickin' hydroelectric plants, him and Brown. They take away our frickin' nuclear plants, and then they want us to cut back? What the hell's wrong with these people?
It's just they have problems in their grid, and it's not going to be solved. I'll
I have one more question. Hoover Dam is on fire today. So what happens if that plant goes down?
That means there'll be a shortage of power, and it'll go up. It's just like any other commodity.
Well, I know for a fact, because we were there at a conference about 15 years ago, that 1.8 million people in Tijuana get their power from Hoover Dam.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. And
I know.
so,
I don't know if you directors knew that. Yeah, I think it was with Keith or back. This was like 15 years ago. The power went out, and what happened was they found out that Tijuana was 1.8 million people were being served by Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is. So you can see our electrical costs are going up. The one that's pretty disturbing here is our chemicals. Treatment cost chemicals, as we went out to bid, we saw through that process that we had a significant increase in the chemical costs. Both of those are heavily transportation related in that they need to have trucks that deliver chemicals on almost a daily basis. And so you can see there's a 58% increase in those chemical costs. Our equipment maintenance, on the other hand, has not gone up very much, mostly because most of that's labor, and the actual parts and materials that are necessary we don't anticipate them going up too significantly along that range. And then also we have to look at the auto fuels and diesels and other fuels that have increased by 32%. So it gives you an idea of what these cost impacts have had on our operating budget. And we've included all of these various items in the budget that we're going to look at and present to you. This is the graph I alluded to previously. When we're talking about DWR variable costs and for the operating budget, one of the largest expenses that we have is the what we call the cost of water, or it's the getting the water actually pumped over the Tehachapi's mountains, one of the largest lifts in the world. And you can see here, this is a graph that shows the cost of that pumping. And you can see here early in, see if I can get the mouse to work here. You can see this is in the early 2000s, 2020. And this 2020 period, you can see it's right about $200, which is what we've had previously for the last 4 or 5 years. It was always in this range. Ignore this dip here. I'll explain that in a minute. And then as we've gone up the following year, you can see it kind of drifted up here, very close into getting closer to that $300 range. I'll explain the dip in a minute. And then you've seen it come up during 22. This is all of 21, and you can see it's gone up in 22. And then we anticipate it getting up closer to $400 through the next fiscal year. So we've budgeted that amount dollar figure for the small amount of water that we will be pumping across the Tehachapi's. As far as these dips go, TWR will provide us with a annual bill of what they think our energy costs are going to be, and that we pay it on a monthly basis. And at the end of the year, which is this period here, they do a correction for what they overbilled us. So when they overbill us, they reduce the rate, and in this case, they reduced it down to zero. So this water that we received in these couple of months didn't have a rate because we had credits built up over the course of the year.
Dwayne, one question. That variable rate, even if we receive a higher amount of water next year, that variable rate wouldn't change much?
Would not change much at all.
That's just, like you say, a variable cost.
Yeah, it's just a variable cost for the power. Yeah, exactly. So it's what it costs to, turn those big old turbines and pump that water. And the same thing occurred here. This is just a smaller correction. So when we track this, that's what that's all about. So you can see that we're going to see this is in 22, and then we're expecting, a further hikes to occur in 23, because we've been watching the statewide electrical market, and we understand that there's going to be a shortage, and it's been acknowledged by the state that there's going to be a shortage for the next 2 or 3 years, especially in the summertime, especially during the fire season. So, moving on to the actual budget, you can see here that we start out with. Can we make that a little bit bigger? Is there a possibility there? Make those numbers a little bit bigger. That's better. Thank you very much. So you can see here we have what we are looking at in this particular area is that whatever's left over from the previous year budget is either used as a beginning balance, whether it's a positive or a negative. And you can see here that we have $948,000 approximately that we estimate will be available from last year's budget once all the financial statements are done and we balance that water fund. And then we have here's our water sales, 24 million. And you can see last year we had 29 million. That was when we thought we were going to be delivering about 45,000 acre feet as opposed to 35,000 acre feet. So you have a reduction in revenue there. As discussed at the last board meeting, we've separated out the dry year water revenue portion of this program, and that's at $2 million here. So that would be coming from those customers who choose to be part of that dry year water program. We have a corresponding expenditure that balances that revenue out.
Wouldn't that be 100% change?
What's that?
Wouldn't that be 100% change where you have zero?
Probably. I probably so. Yeah, it's
Okay, just saying.
a little anomaly. Yeah, it's a little anomaly there. Yeah, you're right. And so we also here we show water banking sales, replacement water. So as in the last few years, we've gotten some replacement water. We don't know what that quantity is, and we didn't want to speculate on what that might be. So we've left that blank, knowing that anything that occurs there would be a positive, and there would be also a corresponding expenditure associated here in the banked water side. So those two would tend to want to cancel out a little bit. And then we have our 1% tax revenue, which is we get from our property taxes, and that's for the base line amount. And then the $40,000 is a new item. That's a reimbursement that we're anticipating from staff time. That number may vary based on the hours, but we've put $40,000 in there because that's our best estimate at this time. Also, we put in a couple other line items that we won't fill in this year, but we will in the future as the High Desert Water Bank gets completed. You'll see that we'll have the operation and maintenance reimbursement similar to staff time reimbursement, and we also will have our recovery fee that will be added revenue. This is the
Dwayne?
Yes.
This is Shelley. Shouldn't we have had some reimbursement on line 4600 from last year because we had staff time on the project last year?
Yes, we do. You're correct. There is a number there. We'll make that correction. We didn't budget for it, so that's why it didn't show there. But we will give you.
Okay, it was an actual.
It was an actual number versus a budgeted number, and that's why it's zero.
That's interesting that we didn't budget anything, but okay.
Okay. So that gives you about $34 million of revenue associated with operating revenues once we add all of these up. And then as we go into the expenditure side of the ledger here, you can see that we have water purchases of $5,639,000. We also have a variable cost recovery of banked water, and that's $4,111,000. And what that's associated with, and it's something that we haven't shown this way in the past, but the amount of water that we placed in to our water banks has come from the reserve account. And as such, once this water is utilized as it was last year, and the actuals will show that, those costs are then charged to the customers that receive that water, and then that money is then returned to the reserve account. And as we go through the reserve account expenditure, I'll show that to you, but it's $4.1 million there. And so we combine those two to give you an idea that it's about 1% difference in operating expense for the previous year. And then we go down the list, you can see we got $3.6 million in our water treatment and delivery. Most of that is associated with the expenses with the chemical costs. You got our operation maintenance supplies, about 3%. We also got some fees and services. This one here, you got 3.1 to 3.8. It has two one-time expenses that we need to account for. One is the election. About $300,000 was budgeted for that. That's the worst case scenario. And then we also have some potential legal fees of about $500,000 that have been included in this particular line item. Once you take those out, then it becomes fairly consistent. And once again, that's a one-time expense for this fiscal year only. Then we have our travel and transportation costs. This includes the fuel that we talked about, but also includes some increased travel due to some lightening of the COVID restrictions and various other items there. Our personnel expenses at 9%, very close to inflation. And this is associated with our step increases, the vast majority of that, along with our COLA requirements, along with the benefit increases. Our other expenses include things like the assessment to the water master, conservation that we have. We have $50,000 in conservation there. And so that's what those are primarily for, and then our depreciation. So you can see here we have.
I have a question.
Sure.
You said something about the water master expenses. I thought we were reimbursed by them.
Yes, we are. When I'm talking about our assessment, our assessment for our groundwater supply.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed, okay.
Yeah, need to clarify that. Yeah. So that's what we have here in these areas here. So the important thing about all of this is we end up with 1,027,000 in a deficit for this upcoming fiscal year, with the positives and the negatives that we have along our budgeted expenditures. So that's the result. So you can see. See how that's gone. It's interesting to note that when you look at our actual expenditure side, it's gone up by about 8%, which is very close to inflation, very close to the inflation rate.
Dwayne, the question I have is that's if nothing changes with the state, we're only going to be $1 million under budget. So if other things come up, catastrophic or whatever, it could be 50% more.
Exactly. We have there's a lot of unknowns going into this budget cycle. The amount of water that may be available next year, the amount of water that we may need to acquire for the dry year program might be much larger. The cost may be much more expensive. So there's a lot of items we'll have to follow through as we go through this budget cycle to identify. But we try to make sure that we know exactly where every dollar is going and what it's going to be utilized for, so that when we do have those changes that undoubtedly may occur during the program, we can address them appropriately. Okay. And with that, what I'd like to do at this time, we do have that concludes the operating budget per se. We have a $1 million deficit. We also have a capital program. There's a couple of components to that. We have the asset management program that John Wozegan will discuss. This has already been vetted with the capital committee, along with our regular program for our capital program for next year, and our IT program that Justin Lipsey will discuss. So with that in mind, I'll let John Wozegan come in and give you a highlight overview of the asset management program that's part of our capital improvement plan.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. Good evening, directors. Tonight I'll be presenting the asset management component of the capital budget. How do we arrive at these projects? Well, as a management staff, we annually look at all parts of the operation, and we identify components or systems that have reached the end of their projected life, or have failed, or will imminently fail. We also identify components or systems that have become obsolete due to lack of availability of replacement or repair parts. As a utility, our philosophy and the culture we've built is that, we're no fail. So we don't wait for equipment to fail to replace it. Everything has a useful life, and we try to follow that. We have a new CMMS system that's going to be coming online that's going to make it even much easier and more efficient to do that here in the near future. Most of these projects that are on this list, on this spreadsheet, are over $25,000. So they'll be brought back to the Finance Committee and the full board in the future for awarding. So tonight I'm just going to highlight one significant project from each category, and then I'll present the total recommended budget for each category. And site challenge, there you go. Okay, so beginning with the Quartz Hill plant, we can shift it over a little bit so I can see the project number. Other way.
Oh, this way.
Yeah. Thanks, Colin. Okay, so, I'm sorry, I'm blind. Okay, so this project right here, project ER 23-03. Now this is, at each treatment plant, we have valves and actuators, and probably the common thing that you've heard over the years when we do these asset replacements are valves and actuators. At Quartz Hill alone, we have over 100 valves and actuators. So this project is replacing 6 20-inch diameter valves. They're filter effluent valves. There's 24 of them in service. We've already replaced 6 over the past couple of years. We're going to do 6 more. In order to access these valves, the plant has to be drained and taken offline for 10 to 14 days to do this work. So we can only do it really once a year, and usually January is about the only time we can take the plant offline to do this. Based on previous work that we've had done, we budgeted $200,000 for this work. And the total asset replacement budget that we're proposing for Quartz Hill is $803,000. And if you see anything else on there that you have a question about, I'd be happy to answer at any point during the presentation. Moving to the Rosamond plant, we have the next project would be the BIR, so right here, BIR 23-03, and that's the rehabilitation of our SNP #1 pump. If you recall, the SNP pump station has 3 pumps currently. Each pump will deliver about 8.5 million gallons a day at a 300-foot lift up to the Mojave tank farm. Pump #1 was taken out of service almost a year ago. It has very heavy vibration. And before a pump of this magnitude destroys itself, we just take it offline and we use the other 2. But it does leave us without some redundancy. So we talked to a couple of pump companies. These are very large pumps. To get them out of the building, there's hatches on the roof. You have to drop a crane through the roof hatch and lift the whole thing out. They really can't diagnose what's wrong with it. They know it is the pump and not the motor. We've disconnected the motor and there's still bad vibration, or there's no vibration with the motor disconnected. So pump companies we've talked to, we're estimating about $130,000 to repair or replace this pump itself. And they won't know the extent of the damage really until they pull it out and examine it. So with a budget of $130,000 for this project, it brings our Rosamond total requested budget to $340,000 here. And Holly, if you go to the next slide for me, please. Oh, Wayne, thank you. Okay, we're back to little again. So there we go. All right. Thank you, Holly. Okay. So, thank you. All right. So now we're at our Eastside plant, and Eastside, we're not going to do a whole lot. That's another thing I should mention. Due to what Dwayne mentioned, supply chain issues, we still have not recovered from the whole 2020 worldwide shutdown. Pretty much, we're still seeing a lot of supply chain issues. So we didn't put a lot of extra projects this year because we're just trying to focus on the things that we believe we can get done in a year's time. Eastside, we've done a lot of work on in the past. This year, we're going to focus on this project, and that is ER 2310. That's replacing 2 bridge pumps. What a bridge pump is it's a pump that removes the spent coagulant or sludge from the bottom of the clarifier. There's 6 pumps out there total. We've replaced 4 the last couple of years, and we're going to replace the final 2, and that'll give us probably another 25 years of service out of these pumps at the Eastside plant. So we budgeted based on past costs, and we've added what we think, is the escalator there. We're recommending $30,000 for this project, and that brings our total Eastside recommendation to $55,000 to complete work out there. Next is our West Side Water Bank. Now, West Side Water Bank is a fairly new facility. We've done some work out there, but part of the distribution system or part of their responsibility is the Willow Pump Station. Willow Pump Station has 3 pumps, 200 horsepower pumps, one 200 horsepower pump, and this lifts water 330 feet, raw water, up over the mountain to the Lake Elizabeth Water Company where they have a small treatment plant. We've kind of patched together these pumps over the years. We're thinking about it's time to replace the large pump, the 200 horsepower pump. They still run good, but like I said, we have to have redundancy, and they've been in service probably longer than they should have. So I think it's time to replace one of these pumps. So we budgeted $50,000 for this pump replacement, and that would bring our Westside Water Bank recommended expenditure to $105,000. Let's see, this next one, you're all familiar with the Acton treatment plant. It's been offline for probably 10 years or so. We buy water from Palmdale Water District. We use the Acton pump station to pump it to the Vincent tank. So the treatment plant has been offline. It has not gone through any upgrades other than the DBP project. It has had no carbon replaced in the filters. It is not ready to treat water at any point. So what we would like to do, and we do have some backup plans, if Palmdale couldn't serve water for any reason, we could wheel water through an interconnection at Palmdale at Avenue P and Division Street. We could put water into Palmdale's system, and they could serve that water essentially through the Acton turnout. So we do have a plan B if needed, but what staff would like to do is keep all this in-house with the Acton plant and utilize our maintenance department to start going through the Acton plant, remove a lot of the obsolete equipment that will not work anymore, some chemical pumps and so forth, and just kind of analyze what it would take to get this plant in some sort of a standby form if we needed it. And that's going to take several years to do. But we thought with an in-house maintenance department, we could certainly lower the cost of doing all this. And we could probably do all the work ourselves other than ultimately having to replace carbon in at least 2 of the filters if we wanted to bring it online. So we think $100,000 expenditure to do this would probably satisfy for the first year. And it would give us a good idea what it would take to get the plant in some sort of standby fashion. So,
John,
go ahead, George.
At one time, were we not, again, you talked about 10 years, but at one time, were we not running that occasionally to meet peak demand or just to keep it in operation?
We were not running it, George, only because the carbon in the filters needed to be replaced, and it was going to be a very high cost to replace that carbon. The plant had sat dry for a few years, and when you let carbon sit dry, it turns into, when you re-wet it, it turns into this pasty mess. So it was going to be probably about $500,000 to replace the carbon in the filter. So at that point, it was decided, we have the agreement with Palmdale. We do have a backup plan where we could wheel our own water through their system. So it was decided, let's not spend the money right now. But as a staff, we've talked about it, and we thought maybe we should at least investigate what it would take to.
But at one time, I think we just operated it just a few months out of the year.
At first. Yes, George, you're correct. At first, we did do that.
Yeah, that was part of our non-project. That was, voter approved, bond issue, and we had the 4 treatment plants. And we were pretty much mandated to build that. And we were asked, by the county, in fact, they pretty much insisted, we build that, the county waterworks district. So.
That's correct.
So that's an asset, and I think we need to preserve it. And probably your plan's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. And like I said, I think we can do all the work in house with our maintenance department, other than the carbon replacement. But I think we can work in that direction. So I agree with you. So that's another line item we have, and then our last line item. okay, would be called, call it, oh, it's, Holly, hang on a second. Okay. Okay, so we have feeders, and feeders are, you know, we call our distribution system feeders. That's kind of the in-house name we have for them. And we have several projects scheduled that we're going to do. And I'm going to point out this one here. Okay, this is project ER 23-14 on the southeast corner of Avenue N and 60th Street West. You know, we have the south feeder. It's a 48-inch pipe that runs down the Avenue N. We have an 18-inch line that comes off of that in the intersection and runs up to the Leona Valley Pump Station. That valve, believe it or not, that valve has never worked. When I got here 33 years ago, I was curious, George, and I was always out turning valves. And I told him, hey, this valve just spins and it doesn't do anything. And there wasn't a lot of traffic back then. You could actually do it. But, you know, we just kind of thought, well, it's going to be digging up the intersection. It's a lot of work. Do we really need it? I think we've gotten to the point where I think we should replace this valve. If we ever wanted to isolate the pump station, we could do it at the pump station, but the line between Avenue N and Avenue N4 where the pump station is, there's no way to isolate it without draining the south feeder. So I think the time has come to really look at replacing that valve, and it would involve digging up the intersection. It would involve a contractor and traffic control for sure. So we've budgeted $110,000 to do that work. We talked to a couple contractors. They thought that would probably be a reasonable amount to do this. And so that is the one I would like to highlight for our feeders. We have several others, but well, you know, that's the one I wanted to let you know about. And then our last one is large tools. You know, what are large tools? They're not big tools. What they are is they're expensive tools. So any tool that costs over $4,000, whether it's an air compressor, a welder, drill press, a lathe, those would be part of our large tool budget. And we budgeted $60,000 for that. There are a few large items that we're going to be getting this year. I don't think we'll hit that 60,000 mark, but that's what we've budgeted just in case there's some unforeseen breakdown of some equipment that we have. So that brings us to, Holly, if you want to just go up just a tad to our total bottom line there. Thank you. A little bit more. There you go. Okay, so that brings our total capital replacement budget to $1.8 million. And these are projects, like I said, I believe that with the in-house maintenance staff and with some help of some contractors that have already said they'd be willing to do some of the work, I think we can get most of these projects done. So be happy to answer any questions on any of these projects.
Now, the budget for this, is most of this under in a reserve or under a depreciation? We kept it for depreciation.
Yes. Well, we'll just the next part of the presentation will be going over those reserves and where these funds are coming from.
Okay, and like I said, the full board, the finance committee, and the full board will be seeing these projects individually as we schedule them for awarding the different contracts. So you'll be seeing them again. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Holly, for your help.
Next, we have a couple of couple of capital improvement projects and some IT projects that Justin Lipsey will look into.
Go on to one more slide. Perfect. Good evening, President Dias, members of the board. A couple items to go through here. We mentioned for the capital improvement program plan. And as John said, the capital improvement committee met and looked at these items on June 6th of this year. Fairly light on the capital improvement side this year. That's mostly due to the ongoing work planned for the High Desert Water Bank, the amount of staff time that that's probably going to take. So we're really focusing on that project. But we do have a couple projects that we want to tackle. Starting at the top here, we have asset project CP 23-01. This is a block building for the Mojave Pump Station. The Mojave Pump Station is currently enclosed in a building that was constructed in 1978. So it's pretty old, pretty much outlived its lifespan there. But that's a metal building, and over the years, it's become kind of weather beaten and deteriorated a bit. Some openings have formed where rodents have been able to enter that building, and our maintenance department staff is reporting that they've spent a good deal of time there. Obviously, as you can imagine, inside of that building with the pumps and the motors, there's associated electrical equipment, panels and such, communication equipment as well. And the rodents have eaten away at several of those components and the wiring and everything. And our maintenance department has spent a good deal of time going in there and making repairs on that. And being that building is, what did I say, 1978, so 50 years old or so. It's thought it would be a good time to go through and look at replacing that old metal building with a new block building. So we've got some funds reserved. You can see the way that this chart is organized. You have the total budget kind of right in the middle, $500,000 for this particular project. And then the columns to the right of that indicate kind of the way that the expenditures are how we kind of plan to spend them. So the overall budget is $500. We're thinking in the first year, we work on, probably once we get a contractor on board, maybe towards the end of this year, maybe we expend half of those funds, and then the following year, finalize that project and spend the remainder of those funds. And then the only other project on this list is the 75th Street Turnout Project. This is a customer turnout in Leona Valley, right off Elizabeth Lake Road and 75th Street West. That turnout serves 4 individual customers. There's a big above ground concrete vault. The customer connections are inside. That was built in 1981, and the turnout piping inside the vault was made of galvanized steel. And over the years, that's corroded away quite a bit. And maintenance department kind of refers to that one as a ticking time bomb, to use their words. So that's one that's a high priority on their list to go in there and rehab that. But they will do some of that work, but there's a header underground. It's going to require quite a bit of excavation to get down at that. So we're looking to hire a contractor to help us with that work. And the total budget estimated for that project is $100,000. So those are the only 2 capital projects on the list for the current year. You can see the total amount there, about $600,000, and you can see the breakdown of how we think that those funds might be spent. So, any questions?
Director Lane, I have a question there. Metal buildings should last indefinitely. Maybe there's some problems wiring inside, but we're in tough economic times, and just because it may be nice to replace it, somebody's got to pay for it, and this is not the time or place to do those expenditures. And maybe you're correct, but I think it should be we should have directors be able to go out and look at that building, and maybe that would be something we would want to do. Try to get a time or so all the directors could view that. But would it be nice? Can we afford it? No. And so that's my comments. Dwayne, what is your comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's fine. We can certainly project this out another year or two and provide some additional security to keep the rodents out. The one aspect of rodent damage is that sometimes when they will chew on a wire in particular, and I've had this happen in the past, it can actually blow out the actual motor.
It can be varmint proofed,
That's the point.
But to spend $500,000 replacing a metal building, I don't see that. Maybe if we took a tour of it, maybe we would feel different. But absent, that, I would not support that at this time.
Okay. Well, we'll If it's the board's pleasure, we'll go ahead and defer that and until we have the tour that you mentioned.
That's a good idea, George. Yeah, let's tour it.
This is Shelley. Did the capital improvement committee look at this?
They did, and they had similar questions, but ultimately they decided to support the project. So, but that's
okay. So I think more consideration needs to be given that it's already been looked at. I think that Director Lane's comments are very valid, but we need to get more information.
Well, okay, I'm on that committee. First of all, let's slow down here. Number one was I was the one who was very aggressive and asked concerned about the building. Number one, because it's already been there. Number two, the biggest thing is we didn't already know that we were already $1 million plus deficit when we had that meeting. So it was one of those discussions, and I agree with George and you, Shelley, that another year or 2 years it's not going to end the world here, and I think we should varmint proof it, and maybe catch one of these coyotes and put it in the room, and it'll take care of all the varmints. But what I'm saying is we could save $600,000. Now the thing with the rebuilt 75th Street, a question I have with that turnout is that was a private turnout. It was Casolas, am I correct? That was originally put in for Casolas, and then they went ahead and added about 8 people on that turnout.
yeah. John will have the history on that. He'll come up and speak.
Yeah, Frank, that Casola is just west of that turnout. This was a separate turnout. It's Miller, it's 4 different names, Kirkpatrick, Bolin. They originally paid to have that turnout put in. It's a separate one from Casola. You are right, though. I do believe the Casola turnout, there's nothing wrong with his turnout, but I do believe that there's several people off of it. But this is a separate one.
Okay. But my question is, I misidentified the people, but it's what I'm saying is it's a steel analogy that I said when that turnout, whoever was produced for, put together, they should be responsible for rebuilding that turnout.
Well, typically the way Avek works is when there's a turnout put in, the customer or customers, they pay an engineering fee for the design of it, and they pay all the construction costs initially. And then once the turnout is done, they sign that over to Avek, and Avek is liable for maintenance on that turnout in perpetuity. That's the way we've always done it. That's the way I believe the contracts all read. So they originally did pay for it, and now it's our responsibility to make sure it stays in good shape to
yeah,
provide.
and I'm not saying that at that time was a good idea, but now, as we can see, Avek's holding the bag. I don't know what the answer is. We're not going to discuss it tonight, but we need to look at that policy because that only serves, like you said, 4 people. Is that 4 people, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Four different.
So those 4 people came to Avek and said, "Hey, can you do it?" We're taxpayers. And they said, "Can we do us a favor?" Sure, but you know what? I have a well. I have 2 wells, and I'm thinking about it. Nobody's paying for my well. I put a well in, 30 years ago, plus in my house. If it breaks down, I have to maintain it. I got to pay to have somebody come out and take care of it. I think the same thing should be looked at as well, because the burden should be on the taxpayers for somebody to have a private turnout that benefits only 4 people. But again, that's just, I want to bring that comment up. But regarding the building, I'm not going to support the building. Not when I found out tonight that we're a little over $1 million in deficit. We just got to kind of, like you said, varmint-proof it, make it a little bit easier to control those critters from getting in there. And then look at it next year.
Frank, let's have the board, if the board agrees, we would also tour that, facility. I just can't imagine it's going to wear out that fast. These, if we can get by another 2 or 3 or 4, 5, years in these tough economic, times, we need to think about it. And a lot of times those mobile turnout, somebody will buy the turnout for X number of dollars. There used to be a fixed rate. And at one time it was the fixed rate was way below what the actual cost was. And people sell those shares off. I don't know what the circumstances, was here, but sometimes people sell them off for a profit right there. So I think the board or the committee needs to look at it a little further.
Hey, I got a question. Was this 600,000 put in the budget that showed a negative of $1 million?
No, it's not.
Oh, so you're telling me now, if we had approved this, it'd be somewhere like 1.6 million.
But I would have shown you.
No, I'm not saying you would do that. I'm asking the question. If the board was to approve this, would this increase the deficit of our reserves?
It would increase the. There's a component of the reserves that are unallocated reserves. That's reserve levels that are beyond what is necessary to meet our reserve policy. That's where capital projects are funded from, and this project would be funded from those unallocated reserves by eliminating the project from this year's fiscal budget. You will not encumber those reserves for the construction of this project.
And I want to make one more statement. Justin, I'm not saying what you did was wrong by adding this under your department. It is just it's up to the board to make a decision, a financial decision, at what we're going to do with the proposal. So keep on bringing these things, through Drain, our manager, and then, we have to decide as directors where we're going to allocate the money.
Yeah, understood.
It's not a personal thing against your decision to bring it. I just I'm asking these questions like other directors are. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and Dwayne, this is Shelley. Can you please look at the contract between in regards to that turnout and see if it actually says we're responsible to pay? Thank you.
Yes.
And just a side note, do we know if 4 people are on that contract? Or?
Well, I'll have to look into it, George. Find out. Each person should have their own water supply agreement.
But sometimes individuals let other individuals hook on, and maybe.
Yeah, I understand. There's several of those in that system.
Yeah, we show 4, but we don't know for sure how many.
Right.
That brings up
that's another meeting.
Yeah, but George, you brought up a good point, because the question is, any other person in our agency, if we do repairs, it reflects the increase in water rate. Does this, since it's a private, personal turnout for 4 people, those are things that maybe we need to analyze. Why should they get the same rate? I'm thinking about this. Why should they get the same rate, and all the other rest of the taxpayers got to pay for it?
We need to look at it further.
Yes, we got to look at it. I agree.
Okay. I have direction here.
Well, and this is Director Miller. I'm on capital improvements, and I know when we were talking about that Mojave pump station, I believe we had other options, like just getting it into a good repair versus expanding it and making it blocked. And he did show pictures of the state that building is in. So I think there's another option we may be able to take to get it into at least good repair and varmint proof on that. So we should take another look at that.
Well, you know what? It's funny you said that, because we just bought the Healy Ranch, and how much metal siding are on those buildings there that could be relocated to the Mojave pump station to be assembled to secure that building better.
Yeah, that might be a possibility.
Yeah, it could be.
All right, I think I have direction. Appreciate the comments. That's what this workshop's all about.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So the next, we have one other item on the capital side, and that's associated with our IT project, and this is the new SCADA software. Once again, I'll have Justin give you an overview of that project.
All right. Thank you, Dwayne. Yeah, moving on to our IT planning projects. There's just one. It's actually a continuation of a project that we have going. The IT and Planning Committee met on June 16th to discuss this item. And you can see it on your screen. This is our SCADA upgrade phase 3. So a little bit of history, as this is going back a couple years now, just in case you don't remember. But we endeavored a few years back to begin the process of upgrading our SCADA system to a current widely supported system. Our current SCADA system is a single engineer supported system. It's developed by a gentleman named Jeff Adler, who works for Automation Services. It's his own company. He comes in from time to time. You probably remember, this is the gentleman who comes from Colorado to support our SCADA system. So sometime back, the board expressed some concerns, rightly so, over having a SCADA system that controls all of our treatment operations being handled by essentially one person. And of course, a person who may be due for retirement fairly soon. So with that concern in mind, staff began to work with Mr. Adler to talk about a process that would bring Avek into the current climate with regards to SCADA software usage and the products that are current to the market and widely used across the water industry. And so the board began that process by awarding a contract to Mr. Adler to upgrade all of the PLCs in our system. So these are the components of our SCADA system that provide essentially the translation between, for example, a button press and increase in flow of a pump, or a command from the computer to increase in a chemical dosage. So the PLC components that we had were obsolete for any new SCADA system. And so Mr. Adler went through and upgraded all those PLCs to something that would be compatible with our future SCADA system. And that was phase 1. Phase 2, the board awarded a contract to engineering firm Black & Veatch to collaborate as well with Automation Services to go through a process of looking at the current SCADA software packages that are on the market and talking with Mr. Adler as well as Avek staff, kind of hone in on a SCADA software package that is current, that meets the needs specifically to Avek. So they were tasked to look at about 15 to 20 different SCADA software packages and keep Avek's unique needs in mind and work on that list to develop a document that specifies what requirements Avek has and begin to hone in on which SCADA system that might be. So they're currently in the works on that. I'd say they're about 3/4 of the way finished with that work. We're working on, we should be receiving some final deliverables from them fairly soon, which identifies a recommended SCADA product. And that's phase 2. So phase 3 of this work, which is being proposed for the upcoming fiscal year budget, is the deployment of the new SCADA software package. So once we've selected the software package that's going to best suit Avek's needs, the next phase would be to purchase that software and then select through a competitive process a SCADA engineer known as an integrator to come in and program and install that software at our treatment plants and transition us over into this more widely supported SCADA system. So that's phase 3 of the project.
Director Lane, is the concern about this gentleman's going to retire, then we're not going to be able to maintain it? Or is something we're out on this? what is the specific problem?
No, yeah, the fact that he developed this software program years ago. This gentleman's been working for Avek since the 90s, and he's really nobody else can come in and take over this SCADA program and make it work the way that Jeff knows how to make it work. So
if he retires, he does, I would say he does updates on it, or he keeps it running. Is that?
Yeah, anything that happens, John can attest. Things that need new programming or need to be updated to help our treatment plants run the way that we need them to run. He does all that programming and support on that. So should he retire or should anything else happen to him?
So is the system? Is it? It's not used in other areas. It's not standard procedure. Or somebody else could come in and take over.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
Yes, it's one of the greatest vulnerabilities that we have in our system is the fact that we have only one person that can work on that system. If something should happen to him and that system fails, then we're in a manual mode of operation until such time as we can get a new system installed and put into place.
Is this mostly, it's not actually hardware, some of this hardware, or is it mostly programming?
It's mostly software programs, and it's, what we're endeavoring to get is an open architecture where everybody is aware of what that is, and a lot of people and a lot of companies can work on it, as opposed to a proprietary type of software, which is what we have now, where essentially it's only this one person.
Makes sense.
So you can see
wait, this is Director Noto. I have a question.
Yeah.
So we buy this product, the software, correct?
Correct.
Yes. So
we have a proprietary ownership in the codes. Do we get a copy of the codes? So if he happens to have an accident, that we could take those codes from the copies and then have somebody else who can interpret and read codes to be able to take over?
Well, that's correct. The integrator will provide us with a copy of all the various particulars of the software as it's being installed, and then just about any competent SCADA maintenance and providing service or company can come in, review that particular materials and be able to troubleshoot for us. So it gives us a lot more reliability with regards to repair and expansion of the system as we expand off into the High Desert Water Bank and various other areas that we may have over the years. Like most software, it goes through various cycles of upgrades and things like that, and we can anticipate that this will do the same thing. But it does really take us away from that proprietary software that was common in the very beginning of SCADA operations in the late 80s, early 90s, into a more robust, open type of software program that we can move into the future with.
As long as we have access to it, and if something, God forbid, happens to him, that we can hire a code reader to go ahead and do that. I just happen to know quite a few of them. So I just want to make sure that he doesn't write something that only he can interpret and not somebody new. That's the only thing I want to make sure.
Right.
He's not even really doing this. He's getting us connected with the software companies that are doing it, and it's not going to be this gentleman in charge of it anymore, is it, Dwayne?
That's correct. That's correct. It'll be completely separate.
Standalone.
Yeah. It is.
Okay, so then where are we? So the company then if he's a broker, then the person that the company we're going to be working with, do we have an agreement with them?
Well, that's we're in the process of developing the system that we need that's appropriate for us, and then we'll hire an integrator. And what that integrator will do is write the code, do the things that are necessary to install that software. That'll all be owned by Avek. Jeff Adler, the previous person, won't be doing any of that work, but he will be a consultant to us to make sure that all of that work gets done in an appropriate fashion, because he certainly understands not only his system, but he works in all those other systems too. So,
okay, I understand what he's doing, but the person who's writing the codes is a different company. Now I have a question for Jim. Jim, do you have someone in your company who that works with contracts that deal with proprietary codes when it comes to getting software?
I think I'm muted, but I can't get to the.
We can hear you.
we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Your question, Frank, is whether you can get people to work on these codes if they're.
Well, no, I'm worried about, we make a deal with somebody, none of us are qualified in the agency, to read a contract that the company who's actually writing these codes, they have to surrender them, be able to surrender those, if we ask for them. And I believe that's an attorney that can handle the verbiage to make sure we have access to those proprietary codes.
Oh, I know what you're saying. So I have someone I've worked with for 30 years who's a wizard at anything like software, computer issues, and contracting. That's Craig Fox. You've all worked with him before.
Okay.
Construction. We're equipped to do that. Yes.
Okay, so I want to bring this up so then you and Dwayne can talk about this, but I hope the board will allow this to go forward, because we need somebody with a contract, because I'd hate to see somebody go away and then all of a sudden we say, hey, we want a copy of the software, and they're saying, well, in our contract, you have to pay us for it. And I don't want to be held ransom if our system goes down.
No, I understand. And so basically they have to either service it or make it non-proprietary for someone else to maintain if they're not available. Otherwise, you're happy to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good comment. And when we, as John mentioned, these are large projects that, our process in the past has been, as we get ready to move forward on this next phase, I mentioned there's still some work to be done on phase 2. So once we get into when staff is prepared to move forward with phase 3, that would be a project, that would then also come back to the committee and the full board before that got awarded. So
whoa, slow down. It doesn't matter what the board is. We need anything to do with an agreement or a contract. Our attorney that Jim points within his firm that understands computer contract and computer verbiage, they need to see it, because there's to have a committee meeting and have the board look at it, that doesn't mean anything. We need legal backing. When you're spending a budget of $4 million, we got to make sure it's right.
Yeah, correct. So
just to reassure you, Frank, all contracts, no matter what they are, go to the attorney before they come forward with anything. So we make sure that as a minimum standard that we utilize.
Okay, well, I wanted to bring that point up right now since we're talking about it. So
potential problem that may occur, and so that's why the board has that flexibility to set those. So when we look at our total reserves minus what's required by the reserve policy, the reserve funds, you can see that we have non-designated reserves on a minimum. We'd have $92 million. That would be non-designated reserve amounts, up to about 34 million, almost 35 million on the maximum amount. And this is these are non-designated reserves that can be used for capital projects and other types of improvements that are necessary for the agency. And you can see the at the end of this year, in June 30th, we had almost $157 million in total reserves. So with the next slide, once we've gone over this policy, what we do is we look at what impacts is this operating budget going to have on reserves, and we provide some additions and some subtractions from our reserve levels to figure that out. And we'll obviously need to make some changes here based on the comments that we received today on the capital program. But if we look at and I went ahead and did this both on a maximum and a minimum basis, you can see that if we use the cash reserve balance at our start, which is close to 157 million, you subtract out the minimum reserve levels, the maximum reserve levels. That gives you your excess reserves that are unallocated. Then if we look at our operating budget deficit that we have, that's the $1,027,000 in our deficit. If we remove that from the reserves, there's other ways to do that, but for this example, it's from the reserves. We look at project carryover. These are capital projects that were previously approved by the board, which are under construction or are going to be going into construction in the next year or two. And then we talked about the asset replacement program of 1.8, the capital projects expenditures, which will be reduced, the IT expenditures of approximately $1 million. We do have to count for debt principal payments. And if we were in a mode of actually filling one of our West Side Water Bank and there was surplus water available, there would have to be expenditure from these dedicated reserves to be able to compensate for the costs that are associated with that. But we do get to add depreciation to our reserves of the 8.1 million. And we do get to add, in this particular case, because we had use of the bank water was actually utilized, and we need to replenish the reserve account, and that's that 4.1 that we shown in the previous operating slide. So what you end up with is your estimated cash or unallocated cash reserves between 90 and 33 million. And then the estimated cash reserve balance is going from close to 157 to 155 million dollars. And that's the impact that the operating budget and the capital program would have on our reserve amounts. There is some additional additions that we'll talk about next time that will increase these reserve levels to a minimum, but we wanted to make sure and show what impact the operating budget had on reserves if we included these items this way. So that brings me to my last slide, which is my recommendation on how we should move forward with this operating budget and how we should include it in this year's fiscal budget. I think we should maintain our current water rate from January 1, 23 to June 30th of 2023. So essentially keeping our existing water rates for just 6 months, utilizing our reserves of $1,027,000 for our operating deficit, we'll utilize probably a little less than $3 million in asset management and capital once we change that project out. And this is the most important aspect, is that we perform a rate study and do our 5-year financial plan so that we can have a new water rate schedule that will take into the effects our dry year operating costs that we're not sure what those are going to be. We want to reassess our inflation, our water supply, and our operating costs that we anticipate going into the next fiscal year, so that we can have the water rates and the budget being prepared at the same time. I think that would really assist both the board and our public in being able to get the proper water rates, whatever the increases might be or decreases as the case may be, and they can get that in advance for their own fiscal year discussions. So that's the recommendation that I have on the operating budget. I hope you have found this information to be insightful. We went through quite a bit of work to decipher our budget and provide you this information, trying to identify where just about every dollar goes to and how it's utilized. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
This is Director Donato. One of the things we discussed is that the dry year operation costs, water, that should be paid by the people that use it. It should not be spread across the entire agency. Is that?
That's correct.
Can you, elaborate a little bit to that for the?
Yeah, what we have put into the budget and what we know will likely be available to us next year during the course of this next fiscal year is there will be some costs associated with water that we transfer water that we might receive from Northern California, similar to what we discussed at the last board meeting. So those there will be a quantity of water that's available there. We've only allocated 5% or about 7,000 acre feet of traditional table A supply. However, if the drought continues and there isn't a real good supply of water there, then we may have to, and health and safety water may or may not be available based on conditions. There could be potential pump back programs that we're discussing with Metropolitan and at the High Desert Water Bank. There may be costs associated with that. We may be looking at different programs that we're unaware of at the present time to help meet the dry water condition needs in the area. So I think it's prudent, given the fact that all those are unknowns, that we give ourselves some times to really look into that, and that will really assist us in getting reliable information so we can set an appropriate water rate corresponding to those costs.
This is Director Lane. I think staff and general manager have done a very good presentation, very easy to follow, very easy to understand. And I think you've addressed the dry year water, and I agree with that. And as far as our reserves, this is an unusual year, not planned for, and to use a little reserves, this is what they're for. So I would agree with that, and I think it's a good job, and we're going in the right direction. We've done that in the past. We've used the reserves. Hopefully, we don't get another 2 or 3 years of dry.
Yeah. Well, I could tell you that there's a lot of things that will happen, and if we continue on with this dry spell, because as difficult as it might be for Avek and our customers here in the Antelope Valley, it's going to be significantly worse for other agencies that don't have the same foresight and resources, local resources available to assist.
Yeah, I agree with George. This agency has even actually seen rougher times. I remember being on the board when we got zero allocation. So that's why we keep on pushing every month to make sure we have the reserves for a time like this, so we don't have to put that burden on our ratepayers. So I agree. And it was very understandable, and I appreciate the time and effort that was put in.
Dwayne, this was a great budget presentation, and you gave us very good recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, we will pull this all together with the items that we had from the first workshop, and we'll be able to get that out to you shortly. And we'll put together the final budget and go over the highlights of the final budget for you at the next board meeting, so that you can adopt the budget for the next year, given these directions that you've given us today. And like I say, there'll be probably be some additions to the reserve levels for revenues that don't show up in the operating budget or in the state water project budget, and are identified in different ways. So, but we'll highlight all of that once again for you to show you exactly where we're at before we. But I wanted to make sure that you see exactly what the inflation impacts have been on the agency, what the lower water sales impacts are on the agency, and how those can really affect our ability to serve. So with that in mind, thanks for all the kind comments. I know the staff has worked very hard on this, and I want to give all the credit to them.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Are there any more questions for Dwayne? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Director Sourceable. I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you.
This is Director Miller. I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam, Gary, Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
George Lane,
Yes.
Shelley Sourceable,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes, the measure passes. We're now adjourned. Thank you all very much, and have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.